All right, so we are going over fourth chapter of Masterclass, and this is Mark Olsen's chapter on cubes. And I'll introduce it again. We'll go over a couple topics today, and then head into the his 15 sample problems. But we probably won't get to those today. So just to review, it's a fairly simple system. It's a position, race, and threat type of system, kind of like the one they introduced during the Chris Bray lectures, or they were really David Presser's idea, not Chris Bray's. It's more of an introductory book, but his focus is on, and he calls us on undefined positions. So we don't cover defined positions. Defined positions might be midpoint holding games, and games that pure races, no contact. And we'll talk today about priming. He sort of views priming games as kind of defined and not subject to this. So these don't work with pure priming games, his position. So the basic idea is you have to have threats in order to double. And if you don't have threats, then then you don't really have anything to double on. And so first of all, you must have threats. Secondly, you have to have an advantage in 2 out of 3 offensive game plans. And the 3 offensive game plans he's talking about are racing, priming, and blitzing. And we'll look at today, sometimes you can give partial credit for this. And we'll look at some examples of that. If you recall, the David Presser-Pratt system is basically a similar idea where you have position, race, and threats, and then he puts in gammon potential, which are part of threats. So, threats are part of both cases. Race is part of both places. And then position is kind of a combination of priming and blitzing, and not just a different way of looking at it. So they're kind of similar. Later on, we'll go into a comparison of the 2 ways to look at it, of those 2 ways to look at it. Now, in order to accept, which we haven't gotten to yet, we may get that tonight, there's a third or fourth consideration, and you have to have an advantage in one of the game plans, either priming, racing, but the additional one, priming, racing, blitzing, the additional one is contact. So, for instance, if you had an anchor, basically what that means. If you have an anchor, then you might have enough of an advantage in contact to establish a take. Contact isn't an offensive game plan; it's a defensive game plan. So that's why it's not considered in whether you're going to cube or not. You're not going to cube if you have a defensive game plan. Okay. That's about it. So let's just take a quick look. I don't know if any of you were at any of the previous sessions of this, so we'll just do one introduction, and then we'll look at like the half points, what Mark Olsen considers a half point, and we'll look at a little bit of the priming considerations. So here on the position now, how would you evaluate this one in terms of, do we have threats? Do we have racing, priming, or blitzing advantages? So let's take a look at that. First of all, let's look at priming. Do we have a priming advantage?
Potentially.
Yeah. Well, it's an advantage. Certainly, we certainly have a priming advantage because black has nothing. Black has already made a point behind. We have an advanced anchor, so black has no priming advantage at all. And so we've got at least a broken 4 prime. We certainly have an advantage there. The other thing too about this system is that we saw this with with Mochi's chapter, where on the opening rolls, where you tried to look at the game plan, whether it's priming or blitzing is the best strategy for yourself or your opponent, and the concept, do you want to split or not, primarily. And you don't split into a blitzing game plan, but you do split into a priming game plan, and there are very small differences. So I wouldn't call this really a prime, but that's not necessarily your game plan, but you certainly have the option, the chance to do it. just make the bar point here and you're pretty strong position. You can make the 3.2 and you got a good prime as well, but it's really filling in this hole. But certainly we have the priming. Certainly we have the much bigger advantage on priming as white here than black, because black has got nothing. And if you have checkers deep or a deep point, it's very hard to get a prime out of that. So, if you open the 6-4 with making the 2-point, pretty much that's the end of your priming game plan. So here, white has a big, gets a full 1, I guess, for priming. What about blitzing?
None, because black's got an anchor.
Yeah, black has an anchor, so really not much for a blitz here. And so that's a big 0 for that one. Race.
Big advantage.
Well, yeah, race is just a pip count, really. So we've got 22 pip lead. That's a pretty strong race lead. When we talked about it for the pressure system, basically he said the idea was 16 pips is basically a full 1 for racing advantage. Mark Olsen says more or less the same thing. Well, he doesn't give a specific number. He says, well, if it were a pure race with no contact and you had enough of a racing lead to double, maybe it was to double and drop, but I forget what it was. But if he took that sort of measurement, which is kind of like a 10%, basically a 10% racing lead, that would be his kind of criteria. 10%. The range is 10% minus 1, 10% plus 2. But so around 10%, that's a good racing lead. So clearly we have that there. So we have 2. And the question here is now, then the question, so we've got 2 out of the 3. We've got racing and we've got priming, no blitz. Do we have threats?
Yes, to roll a double or to make the 6-point, 7-point.
Yeah. Yeah, threats are often the trickier ones to do, but any high double to advance our lead, make the bar point here. Those are pretty strong threats to do. So that's enough.
But I don't understand that. I mean, there's always going to be a threat to have a joker in any position, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah, the question is, are there enough of them here to justify it?
How do you know what's enough?
Well, and that's the question. Mark doesn't really answer that. He does discuss, O'Hagan's law, where if you have like and O'Hagan's law was if you have 9 market losers, then that's enough. That's when you should be doubling. For this specific one, he identifies 6-1, 5-3, making the 3-point, double 3s, double 6s, double 5s, double 4s. So that's like
8.
about 8. I'm not sure that 5-3 is necessarily a market loser, but it's a good roll. So yeah, that's enough. So the question is, do we have the double here? And what Marcos, what I would prefer him to do is if he introduced his takes as well. So we discussed them all at the same time and said, do we have a take here?
The double, I think it's for sure. The take is what I have a doubt.
Yeah. So according to the Olsen system, you have to have a significant advantage in one of the 4 defensive game plans, which he calls, and racing we don't, obviously, priming we don't, obviously, blitzing. Well, we certainly don't. Black certainly doesn't have any blitzing game plan at all because white has an advanced anchor, and contact. So certainly black has something in contact. The question is, is the 2-point enough of a contact advantage? But also the other part too is, are the threats you know, if we're trying to double this, do we have enough threats? You know, we came up with 8 rolls that would be considered threats. So any guesses based on that, does that help? This is a take.
Pass.
It looks like a double from the system.
Pass.
The only questionable one is, are there enough threats?
Well, the 2-point game is supposed to be very bad.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, let's look at it. So, it is a double, it is a take,
Wow.
and it's a big take, and it's the double that's in question here.
Wow.
Um,
Why?
well, it's the weakness of the threats. I would say. Because there's no the market, the only real market losers are the big doubles, I'd say, double fives, double sixes.
So he
Maybe.
is actually giving more weight to the threats than the other things.
Yeah, in the system, Mark's Olsen's system is, you must have threats. If you don't have threats, you don't even consider doubling. And the other idea, in terms of, usually you think of those in terms of market losers. And, there weren't that many market losers, and some of the market losers weren't that great. The 5-3, even the 6-1, if you make that bar point, that's pretty strong, but you might get hit. Black rolls double ones or a one something. And, obviously it's not great for black, but, so that's the weakness here.
If white rolls like a 6-4, 6-3, 5-4, isn't he running away from the 20-point? I mean, he's
Uh,
at the race.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, with this, Lee, you get a number to break your anchor. You probably want to do that here, especially get a 6. You're not if you're going to get 6 other than 6-1, you're not going to come down and leave a blot. So you might as well come out.
Even a 3-4, a 2-5, a 6-1. Well, 6-1 not, but probably every other play I'd start running, breaking my anchor.
Yeah.
So those rolls are not bad either.
Yeah. So I mean, white's got the clear advantage. It's 70 and 30. But the gammons aren't that great with the anchor. So plenty to take it on here, even though obviously you'd rather not be black. Just wondering if we could put it on the ace point. And now it's a pass. That's interesting. I guess it sort of shows the strength of the two deuce point anchor versus the 8-point anchor. So that now, if you have it on the 3-point, this is probably not even a double. No double, yeah. Because now your threat of the prime is not nearly as great, because you can make this the bar point, but you still can get out with 6s or double 6s, and you have the chance to hit a fly shot at some point. Whereas this one, if you're on the 2-point, you don't really have that. Okay, so that's the basic system. I've gone over a few of those already, so we'll go into discussions of what we have in terms of half points when we don't have a clear advantage. So here, do we have what do we have in terms of priming? Do we have a priming advantage here?
Wow.
pretty unlikely.
I think it's more.
Anyway, it might be after a few rows.
Yeah, well, we've got four broken 4 prime versus a broken 3 prime. So we have that now. Our distribution isn't so great because we've got 2 checkers here and we've got a point beyond black, so that's not so great. So anyway, Mark Olsen, his analysis of this gives it a half. You know, he says, okay, we have a small advantage, but it's not a full advantage, not like the last position that we saw where it was a clear full advantage. So he's going to give us a half this time. Now, in terms of race, you know, what kind of advantage do we have there? Well, that I think is easier to see. We got a 9 pip lead. If you go by the 16 pip criteria, that's about roughly half. If you go by the racing, 10% is like 14. So that's more or less half. So Mark also wants to give you half for race and half for prime here. What about blitzing?
That's a 1.
Yeah, I mean that's a much clearer 1. We've got plenty of rolls that are going to point on this guy on the 5 point, or even hit loose and cover the 3, or just make another point, and black is on the bar. And so that whenever your opponent's on the bar, you've got certainly threats, but you have some sort of, I guess not necessarily blitzing potential, but the threats are certainly there. But we've also got 10 in the zone, or I'm sorry, 11 in the zone. And black has a wasted checker on his ace point and a blocked. So all those things add up to certainly blitzing potential. That's the game we'd like to play here. And also to threats. So how does this factor? How does this look into the system? Is it enough to double? And then is it double? Is it a take?
Well, it's up to 2. You're up to 2
2.
now.
Well, yeah. Okay. So we had blitz, and we have half for race and half for prime. If we add in the threats, then we've got enough to double. So then the question sort of is, do we have enough to take?
Hmm.
I would have thought easily, but
I'm sorry, Ray, what'd you say?
I would have thought of easily because black's got a lot of work to do. Oh, because there's the gammons, aren't there?
Yeah. Easy. So you're saying it's an easy take?
Well, I think so.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, the take is, according to the Olsen system, the take is you have,
Contact.
advantage in 1 of the game plan. So we already said, white only has half for prime and half for race. So that would leave at least 1 for black. And black doesn't have much in terms of contact because he doesn't have an anchor, but just the weakness on white's part should make it a take, and it is a double and a take. It's a big double, big blunder not to double this, but also a take. And and you see this, the double. It's really the gammon potential here that makes it the blitzing. That makes you want to double now. Because if you can't successfully blitz this, you'll get the gammon. Lots of gammons here. Okay.
So are we thinking that to double we need like 2 points, and to accept we need like 1 point in those?
Yeah, that's the Olsen system. You need, well, again, you need threats, and you need an advantage in racing, priming, and blitzing. So you need,
and you need threats. Okay.
yeah, threats is the constant. You have to have constants. Well, you have to have threats, and if you don't, that's sort of his starting point. If you don't have threats, you don't double. So
So
it's
is that the same for the take?
well, for the takes, you have to have an advantage in one game plan,
Just one, anyone?
any one, plus the contact game plan. Contact, which basically means you needed to have an anchor.
Mhm.
He said if you have an anchor, it's a take. And I get from, and he doesn't talk about it much, but we saw from the last example that the ace point anchor doesn't really constitute an anchor for that purpose.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
the deuce point did. So, and he doesn't talk a lot about that, but that's sort of it. Yeah.
What surprises me is that black is going to win about 10% gammons, which.
Yeah.
So
Well, if you're just if we go back and look at like the presser system, and because I think that's a more complete system, and not Mark Olsen just has written one chapter on this, and he could write a whole book on his system to flesh out all the things that you might need to know. But if you look at the presser system, Black's had on terms of position. Black has the advantage. Black has the 5 point. White only has the 4 point. So if the emphasis of black would get, I'm sorry, white would get 0 for position. In race, he'd get half. Threats, you got to give probably a 1 for threats because black's on the bar and we got 10 in the zone. So you can get 1 for that. So you got half for race, 1 for threats. And then you look at gammon potential, and this is when you're on the bar with 9 checkers in the zone, you've got pretty good gammon potential, and you see that, so you probably get a half for that at least. So that would that puts you over enough for the double, but it also well, let's see, half a race, nothing for 0, 1 for threats and gammon potential. That just that barely gets you the double. So that's another way of looking at it. But from that perspective, then it's easier to see the take if you look at that, because according to the pressure system, it's barely the double. Now, one problem with the Pratt system there is that it doesn't take into account the value of the 7 point, that sort of priming value, sort of a weakness of that position. So if you kind of combine these methods, you'll see that there's that's what I think one of the things that the Olsen system helps a little bit with is kind of evaluating the prime here. That that is just a little bit of an advantage. It's enough to push it over. Because on the pressure Pratt system, you might it's not that hard to miss the double here, just because black has the better board. The other thing too, and maybe this is part of it too, on the pressure system, there sometimes when black has the checker on the ace point, that makes the race a little misleading. And the weakness of having this deep checker, it shows up only for it shows up as an advantage for black because he's ahead in the race, or gives him that in the race, but the checker's out of play pretty much. And so that racing advantage isn't so good. So if you looked at the press system, you say, well, okay, we only get half a race, but because black has this checker up here, the race is misleading, and we really have more. We should give more credit for the race, even though the pip count doesn't say so. Anyway, so my view of this is the Olsen system helps. It's another way to look at it. If you're looking, it helps to look at several different systems of looking at things. So I prefer the Presser Pratt system, but it has its own nuances and things that you could miss by if you just look at that. And looking at the Olsen system helps as well, gives you a different perspective on it, which I think helps. Okay, so this is a double and a take. Let's look at another system. another position. And so, and this is a trick one. So what's happened is black rolled a 5-3, 5-2, I guess, or 5-4. Came down to split, and then white rolled double threes, and then black dances. So so let's look at the Olsen system. What do we got? We have certainly, I think we certainly have threats here. Because now anytime black dances again, we can bring more checkers down. We can make another point. But just the fact that black might dance and he's got 9 numbers of dance, that's enough for, that's enough threats. But what about and then race? Okay, let's look at race. We've got 8-pip lead. Under the Olsen system, that doesn't count for 1, but it's probably half. We need 10% to get 1, so we need 15 pips, but we only have 8, so that's probably a half for that. What about prime?
Well, it could happen.
Not great.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is not, we're not really going to get prime here. That's probably we're not going to get a prime here, and we don't have enough checkers, to fill out the prime. We've made a sort of deep point. The 3-point is kind of a, kind of the middle point there. It's not really, if we made the 2-point, there's really very little priming we can do. And if we had the 4-point, we have a big advantage in priming, but we have the 3. So, we have, certainly we have some advantage, but black has no priming advantage here. Black has, 2 points that have stacked. And this is the blitzing position. So, we have some advantage in prime, but it's not a full priming advantage, according to Mark Olsen. And we can see that. I mean, we have 3 points versus 2, but we're far ahead, and it's very hard to fill out this prime, given the lack of ammunition at this point. So Mark gives this a half. And then blitz.
Well, you're only threatening to threaten, aren't you? Which is to say you haven't got enough checkers ready in the zone.
Well, yeah, but keep in mind that it's relative. So, the blitz is what we want to do here, and we already have two points, including the 5-point, and black is on the bar. So, blitzing is the game plan that we want to use. We want to apply. I mean, we're not looking to prime this. That's our second choice. We want to blitz this, and we do have an advantage. We have weaknesses, and that we only have 8 in the zone. So, that's a problem. But on the other hand, black is on the bar, and and black has no board, and we've already got 2 points. So, Mark Olsen would give this full 1.
Wow.
So
now we're up to 2.5.
well, no, we've got we again, the Olsen systems, you have to have threats. So we have threats. Black is on the bar. That's enough. That's usually enough of a threat, really. And we have a full 1 for blitzing. He gives half for race and half for prime. So we've got, we've got threats, and we've got an advantage in 2 game plans. And so that's why, this would be a double. Now the question is then, would it be a take? Yeah, and the answer to that is, well, if we only give half for priming and half for race, then it's got to be a take, because we got, we don't. You need a full advantage in 1 of the defensive game plans, but which we don't really have, but we have half. We have half in 2 of the game plans. We have half race and half prime.
So when you're when you're trying to figure this out over the board, when you give yourself a half, you automatically give your opponent a half.
Yeah, yeah, you should, probably the best way is look at it from the perspective of the person who's gonna throw the cube. And so if he's got only a half for something, that means the opponent has half for the purposes of the take,
Wow.
so,
So then it's a double take.
yeah, yeah. Double take. Now, in, this position where it is, to me, this is much clearer from the presser view, what this is, because he would say, okay, for board, you've got 0.7 for the 5 point, 0.3 for the 3 point, that's a 1 for board. For race, you've got half, so you're at 1.5. Threats, just black being on the bar is with, some inner board points, it's worth something, at least a half. Now we only have 8 checkers in the zone, so it's not a full 1 probably, but maybe 0.75, something like that. So you're up to 2.25, and then gamma potential. Well, black's on the bar, you have a couple inner board points, so you certainly have that. Now, if you had more threats, more checkers in the zone, it would be higher. But so 0.3 maybe for gamma potential, or 0.4 even. And now you're up to clear double, and clear double here, and the take is more in question. And the only reason that you have a take is that white doesn't have checkers in the zone yet. Bring another, probably just 1 checker down here. And this is probably this is a big pass now.
Oh, wow.
This is not quite in the zone because he can't, this checker can't make an inner board point, so this is probably still a take, but it's barely a take. Now put a full extra checker in the zone, and this is going to be a pass.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Well, also the race jumps exponentially when you bring another checker in the area.
yeah, if you bring it down, another checker down here, now you've gone. So another, I think, disadvantage of I would call it disadvantage. The Olsen system sort of gives you either get a 1 or a half, and like the pressure system, you get a whole gradient between 0 and 1. So bringing this 3 pips up, gives you like a quarter point under the pressure system, and it doesn't really change. It doesn't flip you from 1/2 to 1 on the Mark Olsen system, but yeah, it's a little bit more in race 2. All these things are interconnected. This gives you more, a bigger advantage into blitz. It also gives you more threats. So, and it also gives you more race. And it also gives you better priming potentially, because now you have an extra spare to make the bar point or even the 4 point, which is going to improve your prime. So all these things are connected. So interconnected, and just moving 1 checker down enhances every aspect of the game, of your it helps raise prime and blitz, everything that you're looking at. So it's all interconnected. All right. Let me get into get started with a few of the priming system. And what Mark also is talking about here is he liked his system, but he found that it didn't work at all in certain cases. And he identified them, or didn't work very well. And he identified that as when you have a very strong priming position. And so he talks a little bit about it. Doesn't provide a lot of examples, but he wants to call priming game plan a defined plan. So he wants a defined game plan. And the Mark Olsen system is for undefined positions. Undefined meaning, okay, you don't have it's not clearly a race, it's not clearly a prime, it's not clearly anything. You've got multiple options to go for. Here, what he's saying is, well, this is your priming game plan. And so you don't really want to use the system here. So if you try to use the system here, you're going to say, well, your threat really is just making the prime. So you've got, I guess, some there that you got to roll a 4. That's a pretty decent threat. In terms of the priming game, clearly you have a priming game plan advantage. Blitzing advantage. Not so much. Black has the anchor. We don't really have spares. Well, just the fact that black has an anchor means you really don't have a blitzing game plan. And then race, we're behind in the race. So if you looked at the Olsen system, you don't have a blitz, you don't have a race, you've got priming, and maybe threats, but you've got 1 out of 2. But still, this is a double and a pass.
Oh.
So what's going on here? And Mark, he doesn't develop any coherent system for priming game plans, other than he says he calls priming is special, and so you don't apply the Olsen method for that. Now we did go over a priming conceptual framework. Again, this is coming from David Presser, in which we said you look at and typically we use for prime versus prime, but the idea is, and black has no prime here, so it's really prime versus nothing. But the way that you look at it was okay. Who has the better prime here? And so here, white, obviously white has the better prime. Black has got 2 points. That's not a prime. Whereas white has 3 primes. The second, how many checkers behind the prime? Well, black has 2. White, I guess you have 2 if you call this a prime, but it's not really a prime. And then, are you at the edge of the prime? And here, black is not at the edge of the prime. And it's really what to call, can you see the light? Can you see the light, meaning can black roll a 6 or a 5 or something to get over the prime? So, here's a double and a pass. If we bring these guys up, what do you think? Why do you think that's going to impact the cube decision?
Well, yeah, because any 6 will.
Yeah, now it's 6. Now
That's
white still has threats, but it's one thing to have a threat, and it's another thing to have an actual position. Here, white doesn't have. White, if white rolls a 6, rolls the 4 to cover, then black is closed off. But here, black can see the light. This isn't even a double here. Up and up here. Yeah, in fact, it's a big. Well, I would say it's a big blunder. It is blunder. It looks like a blunder to double this here. And it's all because now black is well, this isn't the edge of the prime. It's at the edge. You can see the light here. And if it were black were here, then white's not even close. And it's a huge blunder to double this. Because again, black has priming, and that's it. And even his best prime, if he gets the 9, is a 5 prime, which is 5 prime is pretty good, but white doesn't have it yet. So, all right, let's look at.
So, okay, one question. When you went back and white was 8 pips behind, could you think of that as having a half?
A half for what?
A half for race.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. Now that's the funny thing about priming game plan. You wouldn't. White doesn't have half race because white is behind. White is behind by 8 pips. So typically for races you want to be ahead. Now for priming position, it's often to your advantage to be behind, because then your opponent is going to crack his board first, or being forced to come around and potentially leave shots and things.
So I just don't get that, because if black is -8, he gets a half for race. So what happens to the other half?
Well, okay, but yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, here, no, black wouldn't get half for race. White gets nothing for race. Because white's not ahead. So it's not, you know, it's
Okay.
not like you give half black to half to white here. White gets
Okay.
nothing
All right,
because white's not ahead in the race.
okay.
So. Okay, one more priming position. Oh, this one okay, I just did this. Yeah, so here, I mean, black can see the light. The priming value is much less because it's not sealed off yet. And so that, this was the clear take. No, sorry, clear, no double take. All right, here's the last one. Today. And so here. What do we think of this one?
This might be too good to double.
I don't think so. This is a more prime versus prime situation. And
So I think white has 3 anyway. 1, 2.
what do you mean by 3? What are
Well,
the
it's
3?
got 7 and 5 is 1. And the race is 1, that's 2. And he has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 men in the zone. That ought to count for something.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure what system you look at. If you look at the Olsen system, are there threats?
Yes.
There are threats to make the 6 prime. So white has a priming advantage in that he's got a broken 5 prime versus a broken 4 prime. So he's got that. Threats to make the 6 prime. Certainly there's some to make the 8 point, there's some to make the 3 point. So he's got the priming advantage. The blitzing advantage, there's no real blitz advantage here because of black's anchor. So you wouldn't give anything for that, and certainly has race. Let's look at it, from the pressure system, though. And there, you're looking at 3 things, and if you have advantage of 2 of them, you would double, and it's take that's the question. If you just have an advantage at 1, it's the double that's the question. So here we've got white has a better prime, broken 5 versus broken 4. That's one thing. 2 checkers back versus 3. So white has the advantage there. White is at the edge of the prime, and black sort of at the edge, not as close to the edge as say white is. So there's sort of maybe a half there, but black has the better. White has the better prime, closer to the edge. The other aspect of the pressure system was timing, and here it doesn't look like. Well, white's ahead in the race, but again, the timing is confounded by the fact that black is stuck. Black has 3 checkers back, so white is ahead in the pip count, which would normally be a disadvantage, but black may not be able to use that for timing because he may not be able to escape. So like double 5s here is a killer roll, even double 4s. Black's going to crash the board. And so on. Anyway, what do you think this is? First of all, should white double this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then would black take it?
No.
You don't think black takes?
I guess just.
And the answer is,
Oh, you want the answer? I
yeah.
should leave it for next week. You gotta show up to find out. No, this is a double and a take, and it's
Oh,
barely
wow.
a double.
No kidding.
Um, uh, and yeah, I'm surprised that it's barely the double.
I
here.
would feel so good about that double.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you get a lot of drops here, but just because, you know, again, white has the better prime, 2 back versus 3 back. But you know, white is at the edge, but so is black. At least part of it is at the edge. So, but you know, these are tricky to do, and you know, even the pressure system, I think it's better for this, but you know, but it's not clear. I mean, you could easily talk yourself into a pass here, or if you're black, because it's, you know, pressure system doesn't, you know, it's yeah, it's just not clear, that clear to me anyway. And it's still, you know, which goes back to the other view of this is, you know, kind of Stick Rice's rule. Stick's rule was most prime versus prime situations are takes.
Oh,
So if you can fall back on that, if you're not sure, it's probably a take. Which is not, I've never found very helpful because you never really know. Yeah, to me, I would have thought that this one, the take was in question. Whether, you know, the double seemed pretty easy. I think everyone, you know, agreed. I mean, and you're all anxious to double this one. But it's really, the double is actually in question here and not the take. It's
yeah,
a big blunder to pass this, and it's barely right to double it.
golly, just the opposite.
Yeah, just the opposite of what you would have thought. All right, so that is it for this time.
All right, well, you turned me up